A lot can happen in 60.2 million years. Animals and plants can emerge and go extinct. Tectonic plates can shift and alter the landscape of the world, and the climate can fluctuate dramatically. To give you a more in-depth look at what I'm describing, I'm going to talk to you about the Carboniferous period. After conducting research from multiple credible sources, I've gathered enough information to give you an accurate depiction of what this time period was like. The Carboniferous period was a time of great changes that impacted the course of life on Earth. In this presentation, I will tell you about the types of life, tectonic plate positioning, and global climate of the Carboniferous period, which began 359.2 million years ago and ended 299 million years ago. Life in the Carboniferous period was marked by crucial developments such as vast swamp forests, the dominance of large insects, and the emergence of amniotic eggs. At the beginning of the Carboniferous period, during a time called the Mississippian subsystem, plants resembled modern-day plants from tropical and mildly temperate areas. Yet, as the period wore on into the Pennsylvanian subsystem, the later part of the Carboniferous period, the plant life began to shift, and the vast swamp forests, which I mentioned earlier, formed. These forests were filled with seedless plants and trees with bark. The remains of these plants came to form extensive coal deposits, which gave the period its name, Carboniferous, and which humans have been using to power our world. Also late in the Carboniferous, ferns and sphenopsids began to spread across the continental landmasses, and the first relatives of conifers emerged. Corals, crinoids, blastoids, and other types of sea plants were all abundant early in the Carboniferous period. But due to the uplifting of continents near the middle of the period, deltas and floodplains began to form. These environments were unable to sustain as many of these marine plants, and some even went extinct. Animal life on Earth was also changing and advancing. In the ocean, filter feeders were abundant in the shallow, warm waters along the coastline of the continents. Brachiopods, which are shelled sea organisms, were spread across the sea floor. A quick fun fact: according to the Kansas Geological Survey, brachiopod fossils are very common in the limestone of eastern Kansas that originates from the Pennsylvanian subsystem of this time period. But back to business. Other sea creatures that emerged during this time include the first freshwater clams and modern-looking fish. Sharks, marine gastropods, which are more commonly known as snails, and bony fish all increased in diversity. With all the increases and emergences of certain marine species, there also came significant reduction in others. Trilobites, for example, continued to decrease in prevalence throughout the period, and armored fish from the previous period went completely extinct. Additionally, as the period progressed and the continents moved closer together, the amount of shallow shorelines decreased, causing a loss of diversity in the marine life that inhabited those waters, including the filter feeders, which were widespread at the beginning of the period. On land, insects were dominant, especially those with wings that didn't fold, millipedes, scorpions, and spiders. Since there were no birds or reptiles for the majority of this period, these insects were able to grow immensely larger than their relatives grow today. Fossils have indicated that there were 6-feet-long centipedes, 3-feet-long scorpions, and dragonflies with wingspans of 2.5 feet, or, as National Geographic puts it, the size of seagulls. Additionally, scientists have discovered that some insects during that time had beaks to eat seeds and other plant life. Scientists found fossilized beaks from these insects and fossilized seeds with holes that matched the beak's size. Throughout the period, nothing rivaled the dominance of these insects. However, that isn't to say there weren't important developments among other organisms. The diversification of amphibious tetrapods, the emergence of synapsids, which were animals with one hole behind their eye socket, and diapsids, animals with 2 holes behind their eye socket, and the appearance of the first land snails all occurred during the Carboniferous period as well. One of the major biological developments of the time period was the emergence of amniotic eggs. These eggs came about late in the period and allowed amphibians and early reptiles to reproduce without the risk of their eggs drying out in the arid environment on land. Another reason these types of eggs are so significant is because they open the door for the emergence and eventual dominance of reptiles, mammals, and birds on land in the following period. In addition to the changes found in organisms, the structure of the planet was also shifting. During the Mississippian subsystem, Euramerica, the conglomerate continent of North America, Europe, and Greenland, Gondwana, the supercontinent composed of Africa, South America, Antarctica, and Australia, and India, and parts of Asia all remained separate. As I mentioned earlier, the land masses continually approached one another throughout the Carboniferous period, and began to form the most famous supercontinent, Pangaea. A series of collisions in the late Carboniferous drastically shaped the geography of the Earth. Euramerica and Asia fused together to form Laurasia before colliding with Gondwana. This collision formed the Appalachian Mountains in eastern North America, a mountain range I'm sure most of you are familiar with. It also produced the Hercynian Mountains in the United Kingdom. Later still, Siberia and eastern Europe collided to form the Ural Mountains in Russia. The uplifting of the land caused by these collisions and the reductions of shorelines as the continents approached each other greatly contributed to the expansion of terrestrial life, which I discussed earlier in the video. Climate was another important factor that shaped the environment and life during this period. At the beginning of the Carboniferous, the climate was uniform, tropical, and humid. It was difficult to tell seasons apart during this time period because of the uniform climate. Scientists were able to determine the climate of this time period by making comparisons between the fossils of plants from that period and modern-day plants that grow in tropical and mildly temperate climates. Also, many of the planets did not have growth rings, which implies that the climate was uniform. The climate might have been uniform because of the vast ocean which surrounded the continental landmasses as they formed Pangaea. Although the climate across the globe was relatively tropical and consistent, Gondwana was cooler than Euramerica and the parts of Asia it was separated from due to its proximity to the South Pole. Also at the South Pole, glaciers formed and melted throughout the period. This constant glaciation and melting caused sea levels to rise and fall. The shifts in sea levels created more terrestrial habitats and encouraged further progression of life onto land. While we all hear about global warming today, it may surprise many of you that in the late Carboniferous, there was also a period of global warming. The global warming during this period, however, was obviously not facilitated by humans. Global warming in the Carboniferous was a result of continental convergence. The continental collisions destroyed some of the vast tropical forests which were taking in large amounts of carbon from the air. After the destruction of these forests, carbon levels rose dramatically, pushing the Earth toward a drier, hotter climate in the following Permian period. Throughout the Carboniferous period, great changes occurred, which still impact our world. In this presentation, I discussed the development of life on Earth during this time, which led to greater habitation of terrestrial environments. I talked about the tectonic plate movements, which created some of the most well-known geographical structures, and I examined the global climate of the time, which largely guided the formation of new life on Earth and caused the extinction of other species. In looking at a relatively small portion of the Earth's history, we can see amazing events that have led to the present. Thanks for watching.